We are back. Woof and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We come to you every Wednesday from 11 to 11:50. Glad to be here yet again this week. And we're going to be talking about serving our neighborhoods and communities with Fran Neal. We're going to talk about business. We're going to talk about housing, the importance of affordable housing, economic mobility, all kinds of great stuff. Before we do that, let me just reacquaint you once again with what sponsors our show, the Comenius Institute. At Comenius, we cross three bridges. The first bridge we cross is into college, as we're helping college young people who are Christians to think Christianly about the kinds of things that they're getting in college at IUPUI. Glad also to have been asked to teach there. I'm glad to teach with some fantastic faculty, and the opportunities there are just magnanimous. The second bridge we cross into communities, and we principally do that because we have a radio show. We've been doing this for 3.5 years now, have over 175 episodes, over 200 guests, connecting individuals in and around Indianapolis who are doing good, Christians who are doing good, based on Titus 3, 1, 8, and 14. And then the third bridge we cross is into culture, and that cultural bridge is into all of the different aspects of life that we engage. You can find me constantly speaking on things and writing about topics on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all kinds of essays being published, that kind of bit. And also look for our Truth in Two. Go to our YouTube website, our Comenius Institute YouTube website, and our warpandwoof.org website. That's warpandwoof.org, and comeniusinstitute.org or .com to see all of the past TNTs, that is the Truth in Twos that we've been putting out about Christian truth in 2 minutes. And we do this based on a story format. That is, we always connect what we're teaching to story. That's really important to us. But today, we have yet another episode in the life of Indianapolis, bringing in Fran Neal to talk with us today about the importance of business, the importance of housing, the importance of purchasing homes, and how that's done. Economic mobility. We'll talk about all kinds of things. But first of all, welcome to the show, Fran. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
So, Fran, just to start us off, give us just a little bit overview about yourself, your family, your church. Give a shout out to whoever you'd like to.
Well, good morning. My name is Fran Neal. I'm actually a licensed mortgage loan officer here for the city of Indianapolis. I've been there off and on for about 13 years. I'm originally from Gary, Indiana, and shout out to Gary, Indiana.
There you go.
And in addition to that, I have a beautiful wife. I have a loving son. I have 2 pit bulls, and I am absolutely ecstatic. But yeah, that's pretty much my claim to fame.
No, so and you attend what church in the city?
I am actually attending Phillips Temple CME.
There you go.
There I am a musician.
Yes, and tell everybody what you play.
I am a drummer. That's the longest job actually I've had for about 30 years.
There you go. Yeah, so I think a couple of times we met over lunch. We talked a little bit about the kitchen, the noodle, and a little bit of jazz.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
That was a fun segue there. Mm-hmm. So today we've asked you on the show to talk about some things that are really important, really to everybody.
Sure.
Which is about housing and the kind of work that you do in the housing field. So let's start off with some 30,000 foot view of what the situation is housing-wise for people just generally. Then maybe you want to come into the state of Indiana and maybe then specifically into the city of Indianapolis. But give us a sense of what's going on out there in terms of housing.
So right now, at this point in time, the housing market is very, very high, which is a good in some facets. It's very, very good. You have those individuals who are looking for houses, they're obtaining houses, no problems whatsoever. Housing market right now, Indianapolis is ranked 7 as far as being one of the most affordable places to live right now, and that's with 1.9 million people being here.
And that's 7th out of what?
7th out of 25.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. We in CNN Money, they have been ranked in the top three for 2017 as well as 2015. Um, they
So this is Indianapolis in comparison to the rest of the nation, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And then right now, I mean, at this point in time, we're about to see a second, and for Indiana as a whole, we're ranked 10th in the nation for home growth and development.
Wow.
Yeah.
So just because I know a little bit of something about this, I'll see if this is true or not. Is it true that where I live in Fishers in Hamilton County, is it one of the fastest growing counties in the nation?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
It is one of the fastest growing counties in the nation.
And what really fascinates me is when I talk with people about housing costs, and I tell them that I live in Fishers, I live in Indianapolis, and I tell them how much my house costs.
Mm-hmm.
And just take, for instance, when my little sister comes to visit or my mom comes to visit from Denver, they will say to me, your home and the property that you have would go for $750,000 and up in Denver.
Absolutely.
So it really is about
Location. Yes. I watch HGTV a lot, and it was one of the things that you can find a 1,200 square foot house in California, just as an example, and it's like $500,000, $750,000. And I was like, how is that possible? That house is no more than maybe about 60, 70,000. Yeah. So it's definitely about location. Yeah, it's definitely about location.
I find that fascinating because, you know, a house, we live in a subdivision, like so many people live in subdivisions, and it's, you know, no big deal. I think maybe there are 6 different models of homes in that subdivision.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, you know, we've gone in and built something brand new to certain specs, you know, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It was there. We purchased the home, kind of run of the mill in the sense that they're like other homes. But in this case, when you're talking about national stats now, mm-hmm. you're talking about this being one of the most affordable places in the United States to live.
Absolutely. I mean, right now at this point in time, we have a lot of jobs, people coming from both coasts, both East and West Coast, coming to live here because the cost of living is really, really affordable. Mm-hmm. We have those people who are actually before even looking at the houses because of the cost, mm-hmm. Which is really, really good. But at this point in time, what I want to make sure is that those individuals who have low to moderate income have their fair share or their fair shot as going into buying and purchasing houses, mm-hmm. and being able to turn the next page of their lives.
So let's make the segue into that particular discussion, because this is the important issue, mm-hmm. for people who are living in Indianapolis who are maybe middle income and below. Mm-hmm. Their opportunities may not be like other people's opportunities in terms of mobility, coming from one place to another, easy to move from one place to another, one house to another.
Yeah.
Tell us about that situation.
Well, I mean, it's actually a double-edged sword. Number one is because some of the resources are out there. They're within the lenders, but yet still it's not really educated on. So you have the lack of knowledge on one side, mm-hmm. and then the other side, you have the lack of discipline.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, when you say lack of discipline, you mean by that what is lacking in terms of discipline?
Well, I mean,
people's choices.
You're interested, just as an example, you're interested in purchasing the next car as opposed to purchasing the next house. Or, and it's no offense. I mean, if there's a need for it, by all means, go and do it.
Yeah.
But what I want to do is kind of give you an idea and say, hey, if you have an opportunity to decrease your wants and increase your needs, you may be able to look at possibly getting a new, being able to own a home, mm-hmm. or own, and the other things will come along in time, because having a house is one of the largest ticket items that you can actually have, for a long period of time.
And it actually accrues financial benefit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So only because I just got my assessment recently. Of course, all the assessments are going up because, people like the tax dollars, I'm sure, and among other things. But that's also beneficial to the people who live there.
Yes.
Because if you turn around and sell your home, now you can sell it for more than, and of course, we all know that.
Yes.
So let's talk about the issue of mobility and what is it that maybe some people are struggling with in terms of mobility. You mentioned choice a moment ago, the issue of discipline. Why is it? Are there other external factors that make it more difficult for folks to move from the place that they grew up, go to a different place?
Yes, sir. I think it's just because of the lack of knowledge and the lack of education that we have. Not necessarily. I mean, we have those people that have somewhat an inkling of what's going on, but there's some people that just have absolutely no idea. And that's where I come in. I have been one of those people.
Why don't you tell people your story?
Sure, that's no problem. I mean, one of the things that I talk to a person, I just let them know that, hey, I mean, I've been there. I've did the bankruptcy things. I've done the worst case, some of the worst case scenarios that you can even think of. I've been there, and it came to a point that I just wanted more. You know what I mean? At that point in time, I was living with my girlfriend. I mean, at that point in time, not my wife, but we had it tough.
Yeah.
We really had it tough, and I wanted more overall. I think that they deserved better, and I was going to go by hell or high water to go and make sure that actually happened.
Mm-hmm. And how did you go about the process so that people might make a connection between your story and maybe perhaps their own story and how they might turn their lives around to actually become homeowners?
I'll just tell them patience, take time, definitely look at things for what they are. Smart Guide to Money, I believe it was Dave Ramsey, Smart Guide to Money, actually helped me out a lot to just develop the know-how and what it is. And it's just the itty bitty steps that got me to where I was today.
Yeah. So one of the most crucial financial statements I think that anybody could interact with is, if you don't have it, don't spend it.
That's true. That's very true. If you don't have it, don't spend it, or don't try to acquire some type of credit to go and get it, because it's not doing anything more than increasing debt for you.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the universal principles that you help homeowners come to grips with.
Sure.
If you were going to list, let's say, the top 3, 5, 10, take however long the list is, I don't know. Tell us about some universal principles that you tell people, look, these are important ideas in order for you to get ahead in terms of home ownership.
Absolutely. Well, I go back to thinking about my dad. My dad was saying, hey, if you have 50 cents or if you have $1, take 50 cents, put it to the side.
There you go.
Okay. For a little while, I didn't really have that idea. Like, that didn't make any sense. I don't trust that. What? I want to party. I want to have fun. I want to go and do this. But what I found is that actually happened. That actually works. One thing about the book, once again, Dave Ramsey's book, is that he says start small. Take $1,000, put it in the savings, don't touch it. And with that, what I found, it empowered me to have options. And it gave me a chance to look at things for what they were and say, well, hey, do I have this money? Do I want to go and spend this money? No, I don't want to go and spend this money. I want to go and hold on to this money because I like the fact of having money.
That's right. There you go.
So the first thing I would say is just save. Save. It doesn't necessarily be $1,000. The only thing that you need, I mean, if it's $200 and you want to save 100 or 75, whatever is within your means, Look at it for what it is and save it. And do not touch it by any means. Don't touch it. It'll take care of you in the long run. Because at this point in time, in acquiring the house, everything is in the long run.
The issue of longevity and patience. See, let's talk about playing the long game. That was one of the things that you and I talked about a little bit.
Yes.
In terms of going back to the concept of patience, of course. But when you think about owning a home and turning the next page, as you said earlier in the discussion, we were talking about this connection then to thinking about 10 or 20 or 30 years down the road. And let's talk about that. When you talk with people, that universal concept, how does that strike them when you talk about those things?
Well, they're actually afraid. 30 years is a long time for people, and they say, well, I'm going to be locked into this debt for 30 years. Oh, my goodness. But realistically, it's not a process. I mean, right now at this point, it's not that long. Sorry.
Yeah.
Let me clarify.
Yeah, sure.
The average homeowner looks at changing houses probably every 5 to 7 years. Now, with how the interest rates are going up and everything, you're probably looking at between 8 and 10. Okay. But yet still, there's a lot of mobility in moving from an existing house to a new build, an existing house to a condo. You have people that are changing their positions at all times. So empty nesters going from these 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 square foot houses to just 1,800 square feet, and and at that point they're doing well. So
yeah, we're going to be taking a break here coming up on in just a couple of minutes. But before we do, let's talk about the importance of helping people to understand not just longevity, not just patience, not just the issue of saving, but let's talk about the necessity of discipline. We talked about that a moment ago, how discipline is really important. How do you help people get to that place? Do you just tell them about Dave Ramsey? Do you give them other directions to go or footprints to go, or tell them a story about your dad, or how do you do that?
Well, really and truthfully, what I do is I talk to them. I interview them. Tell me what it is that you ultimately want to do when they come in. Well, I want to go and buy a house that's 1,800 square feet. Well, tell me about what it is that you're paying currently right now. Well, I'm paying $600 in a month in this. Well, you can, in order to do this, you can go and do this. And not particularly in that number sense, but I want to know their needs and what it is that they want and what it is that they can afford. And ultimately, I don't want them to be house poor, because it's good to have $200,000 pre-approval, but yet still not making $125,000 payments per month on a house is not going to be beneficial for you at all. Yeah. So we want to get you into a place where you can actually stay.
We're going to come back to that house poor concept after our break. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Group site. We're coming to you not only Facebook Live, we'll have a podcast later on that'll be put up at the end of the end of this particular week, and you're also listening to us on your earbuds, for instance, at work. We're grateful for Josh Collingwood, who takes care of all of our tech stuff for us. Thankful for him. And
thanks, Josh.
Yeah, see, he's thankful. And for Polly, who makes all the connections around town for us. Polly Riddell, who was our Chief Connections Officer. Warp and Woof Radio, one song break. We'll be right back. Facebook Live, are still with us. HB's going to take a picture of us because...
Let's give some love out to Tamala Dickerson, man. She's on here.
Okay.
Hey, Tamala, how are you? It's good to hear from you.
So you play with my boy Cheese Burl over here.
Cheese. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's my doctor, dog. That is my brother.
I ran with him for about 15, 20 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Funny guy. Hysterical. He's hysterical.
You don't have to say another word.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
Yeah, so one of the things that we find, HB had a big smile on his face when, you talked about being a drummer and, of course, Cheeseboro and all the other connections. But,
Sure.
HB has been doing promotions for years and years and years around Indy and knows all the folks at all these different places. So it's fun to bring in people that make the other connections, other segues. We've actually had somebody here who told us about the history of jazz
Yes.
in Indianapolis, which was a lot of fun. So we've gone in lots of different directions.
All right.
Yeah, we got you covered, man. We're all good. We're all good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I don't even want to think about that.
this is probably a nice segue to talk about being house poor. Help everybody to know what that means. What does house poor mean? And then what are some other concepts that you want to jump into that'll help people that you think will be beneficial for them?
And then my boy, Tony Bradley James, as he calls himself, said, "Go, Ron." So you play with all my guys, man. This is too funny. How'd you slip through the cracks?
So here's the funniest thing, man. I am a fan of the 70s and the 60s.
Yeah.
As far as music, soul, funk, R&B.
Yeah.
I am a fan of the 70s. I don't know. And I got our appreciation through my dad, who listened, he was a fan of everything that came out of Sun Records. So I think that's where I developed my love and my passion for music, to be honest.
I said, how'd you creep through the cracks, man? I've been doing promotions and promote music. All these guys that from Phil Coleman to Rodney Stepp to Cheeseboro to Yogi, all them cats. Your fellow drummers, Keep Strong.
Keep Strong.
These are all my guys, man. That's what I'm saying. How did I not meet you?
Oh, well,
that's scary.
Well, I was on the circle. I was on different circles, just a different wavelength. I mean, we turned the same corners, but yet still.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's ironic.
It's just a different time.
Yeah.
Different time frame.
Well, good stuff.
I think we talked about this, or I asked the question, but forgive me, I've forgotten the answer. Do you do any club playing anymore?
Not really. Yeah, I'm on the church circuit. If they had called me to go and do something, I'm going to do it. That's no problem.
Yeah.
Shout out to Ground Zero too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Richard Morris.
So I heard you mention Gary.
Yes.
So you work with? I used to manage Reggie Foster Jr. I managed Reggie when he had different levels out. He was with Orpheus Records, man. It's like my brother, man. Like my little brother. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell you. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Reggie played with Alex Bouillon for my 5th year anniversary a couple of years ago.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. How did I not meet you? Because yeah.
Wow.
Check this out. This is what my mom thinks.
Yeah.
I just showed him, Mom, what you wrote. He has a great speaking voice. That's true. You've got one of these great baritone,
Man, I'm just trying to make sure I don't mess up.
No, you're great. Everything's going really well.
Man, I got Radio Next. They loving you. They loving you on Mark's page. So we got 2 feeds going. Man.
Thank you.
So what we say to people is when this thing goes out, and it's going out now, but it will continue to get hits throughout the weekend and next week and so on.
Sure.
Over 500 hits.
Wow.
People are watching and listening, and the pod. So everything from when I first started posting, all the way through the podcast, Facebook Lives, people pick this stuff up. I archive these. They all go to our website. At least 500. Some of the shows really just take off. Like, for instance, if there are folks out there that are hearing about housing and stuff, they might say to their friends, "Hey, you need to listen to this man. Go check him out." And we are back, Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. Glad to be with you every Wednesday from 11 to 11:50. And we have discovered that it's Old Home Weekend here between HB and Fron Neal. They ran in some of the same circles, know some of the same people, make some of the same connections in the jazz circuit. So that's really cool. Why don't we just, because I'm talking about it, Fron, why don't you tell folks about the kind of music you grew up with, the kind of music you love, and tell us a little bit about your dad and that connection.
Well, my dad was a real big fan of blues in the earlier times, and I began to appreciate music. It was kind of a combination of both. Blues on one side, I kind of, as they would say, straddle the fence. Blues on one side, gospel on the other. So both of those were playing in my home. So I think that's where I got my appreciation of music, and then, picked up sticks and then started work on the gospel circuit or the church circuit. When I came here from in '96, when I came here to IUPUI, that's where my alma mater is. I would find myself going out on Wednesday nights and Thursday nights to play blues, but on Sundays I found myself playing in the church. So some of the names: Tony Cheeseborough, Lester, W.T. Feaster, Bluesian, and the Gordon Bonham Band. I've heard them. I've played with them. Some of those guys are really, really influential as far as me to appreciate even more music in the '70s and some of the '80s. And
it always fascinates me when we have guests and we have like somebody like you comes in, and we pretty much plan what we're going to talk about, but then something else rolls out, and we start talking about music in this case.
Sure.
And we want everybody to know, we're not just one-dimensional people here.
Oh, no.
We actually have lots going on in our lives.
No, definitely different. I have different things going, different dimensions.
Well, just one more step here back to your dad. Tell us a little bit about your dad and why that influence in music stayed with you.
Well, my dad, he was great. He was just a lover of music. He didn't sing well, and he clapped on 1 and 3. That's a drummer's joke. But he appreciated good music. And that's where I learned to appreciate good music. He was valuable. I mean, in every aspect, a lot of it. And not only my dad, my mom as well. They were valuable people. And they were valuable to me because they instilled some things, even though, they talked at me. It took them a time to talk at me in order to talk to me. I see myself in them now with my son.
Okay.
So,
yeah. Well, let's make the connection from music to your dad, to your folks, and then to the issue of housing, because I'm sure that you probably learned a lesson or two growing up about the necessity of housing, and maybe some things that you learned in that respect.
Well, to be honest, when I grew up, I thought everybody had a house. You always had a house to go to. Or if you didn't, you had an apartment. You had a place to call home. That was the most important thing. So when I came of age and started looking around, and I first got into this industry, I found out that there were so many people that were actually in the process of buying houses, which were okay, but there were some people that just really wasn't able to do it, or wasn't able to actually acquire houses. You have these people that's been living for 20, 30, and 40 years, and, they're very private people. But when you find out that they had, they were using a landlord for the loanness and not actually own their house, it was kind of a disturbing. It was a disturbing. I don't even know if I could say a disturbing epiphany. I mean, or discovery.
Yeah, sure. So I'm assuming from the kinds of comments that you're making that you grew up in a home that your parents owned.
Yes.
Okay. So for you kind of grew up with this general sense that home ownership was, kind of normal and maybe even expected, and something that people ought to do, should do, could do.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you see people now in this particular culture with the difficulties that they may face. Let's say, for instance, we're talking about folks who maybe don't have the kind of savings that might be necessary for them to take that step into home ownership because they've got to have so much of a percentage down on their home. How does that work out for them, and how do you help them get to the place where they can actually get that down payment? What steps do people need to go through?
The first thing, discovering the needs and looking and asking them, because everybody's business nowadays is everyone's business. Well, their personal business.
Yeah,
rather.
sure.
Asking them that what is it that they need, and then allow them to be transparent with you, and just talk with them and discover what it is that they have as far as assets. I mean, and there's no number too high or low to take. There's no credit score too high or low. I'm a strong believer in not saying no, but I'm a strong believer.
Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So allowing them to be comfortable and growing that rapport where they have no problems in sharing that information with me.
Yeah, it sure sounds like part of what you do has to be psychology. Part of what you do maybe has something to do with being even pastoral, in the sense that you're kind of giving them wisdom, you're leading them in some way, some direction. You're shepherding people in a way that is helping them see perhaps new things that they hadn't seen before. When you think about what you do, what are some of the ideas that kind of pop off? Maybe I've given you some ideas right there, but what are some of the things that you think of? Hey, I really feel like I'm doing this with this individual, with this family.
Sure, I think that is all ministry, to be honest with you. There's some things that if you're being, let's just talk about that. If you're being a vessel to kind of help a person to turn the pages of their life, so to speak, I'm a strong believer that God will use you on that. God will use you without question. I mean, what can I say? It's nothing more than ministry.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Ministry. I some time ago, a number of years ago now, 5 or 6, I think, I was teaching an adult Sunday school class. And in the adult Sunday school class, the title of the Sunday school class was Vocation as Ministry. And one of the things that we said during that particular teaching time was that whatever it is that you do, that thing is ministry. So you're helping people, you're encouraging people, you're bearing with one another's burdens, you're putting up with people, some difficulties that maybe people have, whatever the case might be. So your connection to ministry really does ring true to what Scripture teaches about this is whatever it is that you do, your vocation is your ministry. And that's a powerful idea. When you are engaging with people and helping people forward with the kinds of ideas that you do, tell us some of the stories, some of the success stories of where people have gone from to where they are now. You don't have to mention names or anything like this, but general overviews so that people get a sense of, hey, I see this. Fran's given us 2, 3, 4 stories about folks, and I see myself in that story.
Sure. One comes to mind right now is an individual that I'm currently working with, and I won't name names, but she knows who she is. They know who they are. She has been with me for about 6 months, and definitely a hard worker. She does her best to make sure she stays on top of things. There were a couple of blemishes on our credit, and we worked together, and it was one of those not no but not yet situations where we worked fervently. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. We worked fervently to get her credit up to par.
Mhm.
And about 3 weeks ago, I was excited to let her know that she was pre-approved.
That's great.
And it was a big release. You know, it was a big relief. And I think that there's no dollar amount that's out there that you can be paid to compare to the happiness that individual received. There's no better feeling in the world to help a person answer a question that's been in the back of their mind, so to speak.
So you've given us a story about somebody really who, kind of came with maybe little or nothing, in the sense that they didn't necessarily have a lot to work with.
Absolutely.
But you got them to the place where that was a possibility.
Absolutely.
So I think a lot of this, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't a lot of this really kind of hinge on credit ratings? And how is it that you help people in that regard?
Well, as far as dealing with credit, your credit, of course, is important. One rule of thumb that I always teach, or I always tell my clients, is make sure when you have credit, you don't spend it all. So just for example, you have a $300 card with a $300 limit. You shouldn't go beyond 30% of the utilization, which means that's about $90 of use on that card, period, point blank. And once you use it, don't be afraid to pay it off immediately. If you have, one thing that I personally use is, if I have money in my pocket and I use credit, that's the amount of credit that I would actually use to keep from
Having to pay interest.
To have to pay interest, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what you'll find that after about 6 months or so, there will be a slow raise in not only your credit limit, but your credit score. And that's what's most important.
So could I say it this way, that people need to think about playing the long game when it comes to housing?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, when I say the long game, as far as the long game, once you acquire the house and you can be considered trustable.
Yeah, sure.
With a mortgage, then everything else begins to fall in line.
Okay. Well, let's come back to that concept that we hit on the first segment, and I said we were going to start the second segment with, and then I forgot, which was being house poor. So let's talk about, what does that mean, and maybe how people can stay away from becoming that way.
House poor is basically being excited about everything and running all of your pre-approval, or what it is, your approval amount, up to the max. You were pre-approved for a $220,000 house. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to buy a house that's worth $220,000. You would probably, it would probably be beneficial to stay within the same amount of what it is that you can afford for rent. For $650, if you're doing $650, that's probably roughly about $140,000 house. You don't have to go and double up the payments to have that.
Yeah.
Because what happens playing the long game, you end up upside down, robbing Peter to pay Paul. You've heard that expression.
Yeah.
So we tried to, in that case, scale you back.
Okay. So let's talk about the percentages now. Let's say, well, I don't know if we're going to talk about salaries necessarily, but let's just talk about percentages. How much of what you bring home every week or every month, however you do your finances, should you put into housing? So
basically, you're talking about debt to income ratio. Your debt to income ratio should be no more than maybe about 45%. That's what your regular lenders.
So 45% is what?
Is 45% of your total income.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's the amount that you're paying on debt, is what you're saying.
In total.
In
yes.
total.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good round number.
Okay, so that kind of gives everybody an understanding of if I go into a house situation, then I shouldn't go over that amount.
Yeah. Yeah, and let me expound on that a little bit. That goes from 45%, and I mean that can go all the way over to some other things. You know, it's all lender specific.
Okay.
So, but what I would say personally, 45% would be a good round number.
Okay. So, when we're talking about the issue of being house poor, is there ever a situation where, let's say, for instance, a financial downturn happens and, people, let's say back in 2007, 2008, 2009, we talked a lot about mortgages being underwater. When we talk about the kinds of help that you're giving to people, how do you help them stay away from scenarios like that?
Well, I mean, the beautiful part about that is that there's been a lot of change in the financial industry that kind of safeguards the client from that, or the member from that. So, they're the products that they have of the yesteryears where they thought, hey, that was a really, really good idea, like your interest only stated income type of products. We have a tendency to stay away from those now. We are now doing fixed interest rate loans. A lot of people are looking to go to fixed because they know that monthly payment is going to stay right there.
Right there. Yeah.
You may have a deviation from the beginning of the loan because of the property tax that you mentioned before, but it's actually it's a blessing and a curse, so to speak, because your appreciation value goes up, which means that you have a higher margin for equity in your home, as in comparison to your taxes going up. You got to pay a little bit more to pay. You got to pay the states, or
right, exactly. So I remember when this kind of commitment was being talked about in the legislature here in Indiana. This was when Mitch Daniels was governor, and I think they put through, what is it, a 1.5% cap? Something like that, so that you can't keep raising rates on people.
Well, it's actually 1% for the state of Indiana.
1%.
Yeah, okay. It's 1% for the state of Indiana. What we do is they don't go beyond that. So if you say you have a $140,000 house that's looking at roughly about $1,400. Yeah, $1,400.
So $1,400 in taxes a year. And what happens then, of course,
worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario.
Yes, worst case scenario.
Yeah. So it's really important then when you talk with people about this, not to overextend themselves. There's another term that we have a tendency to use sometimes. And let's talk about the overextension. When you talk about this with people in terms of housing, do you talk about how much they spend on other things, and can they discipline themselves in other areas, those kinds of issues?
Absolutely. We look at a total picture of everything that they do. We look at your revolving credit. That's one of the major ones. We look at house notes, where existing rent or house in some cases for those people that are transitioning over to a new build or something like that, or a new existing. We look at the car notes, and we'll also look at installments. Anything that's involving revolving credit, that's what we look at. And then we compare that to what it is that they make on a monthly basis gross.
So people really have to be transparent with you, or they better be.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's beneficial for them to.
Yeah.
If and in a situation where everybody is very private with their information, they're not going to remember everything. Sure. And that's okay. We understand that. Me, as in my profession, I understand that. But try to be as accurate and precise as possible.
Yeah. One of the groups that we really haven't talked about much, and maybe we should talk about more, are those people who are considered to be of AARP age, which means people like me now, because I'm 62. So, I'm over the hill, some people would think. But anyway, when we talk about folks who, let's say, are getting...
Shout out to Methuselah.
When we talk about folks who are getting older, what are some of the things that you might be saying to them? about next steps, think about the future. What are some ideas there?
Well, really, it's actually the reverse. They actually tell me what it is that they want to do. So, at 62, you're in that case, you're only as old as you feel.
Yeah.
Some people think that they can still maintain, a 2,000, 3,000 square foot house. I mean, who am I to come in and say, well, you may not want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Me, on the other hand, is, you tell me what it is your wishes are, and I can tell you what it is it's going to take for you to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's really important then to generally have an understanding that it's important to have a conservative mindset when it comes to finance.
In all things, yes.
Yeah. So you're not overextending yourself. You're
Absolutely.
not overspending.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just go and blow money that on something that's going to be here and gone tomorrow, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's an experience that you want to have and you've saved for it, whatever.
Right.
So savings, as far as you're concerned, savings is paramount in homeownership.
Absolutely. Savings is paramount. Credit, making sure your credit is in good shape. Right now, the bare minimum that we look at as far as number wise, as far as my lender is concerned, is 620. But there are some places, don't let that have you to lose hope, because there are some places that will offer as low as 580. And I've heard some other stores is between 500 and 520, but I want to go back and check that.
Sure, yeah, of course. This has been a really important conversation to have this morning for folks that are listening out there who maybe they're renting and thinking about home ownership. Maybe they just got married and their situation has now changed. They want to get out of that rental property, whatever the case may be.
Sure.
Seconds, Ron, and tell us something that you want to make sure everybody remembers in your voice, from your perspective.
Yes.
What's the important thing to remember?
First and foremost, just understand that it is not as hard as one would make it out to be. It is, you can do this. Coming from an individual who was foolish in his early years with his money to where he is right now, being blessed with a home and better financial picture than what I was, let's just say about 9 or 10 years ago. You can make it, man. You can make it. This is not, it's not rocket science. There are people that are out there that's like me, that are like-minded, that really want to see you win, who definitely want to see you turn a page. You deserve it. You definitely deserve it. Everything that's coming with you, coming to you, you deserve it. So let me know. I'll leave my information here on how it is that we can help you. And that's
Yeah.
pretty much it.
Yeah, we'll make sure to get the information. Anybody who reaches out to us. For those of you who've been watching us on Facebook Live, thanks so much for all the waves and the connections. I can't necessarily wave right now, but I'll talk with you later on. Yeah, outside of that kind of wave. This is always something I think that's good when you give people information that's helpful. And one of the things I wanted to end on here was the issue of something you said I don't want anybody to walk away and forget, and that is the blessing of God.
Yeah.
And the importance of how his work in your life has been beneficial.
Well, let's just be honest. That should have been point number one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't do this without, I don't even know how I got here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm just going to be very honest with you. I have absolutely no idea how I got here. So if I had looked in the future 10 years from where I was 10 years ago, I would have never said that I would have never made it. So.
These are important ideas, things that you maybe need to hear from a church perspective, from a God-centered perspective. Of course, this is what this program comes from. You've been listening to Warp and Woof Radio, RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. We come to you every Wednesday from 11 to 11:50. Next week, we have Gary Means coming in, talking about financial future. Looking forward to having him on the program. And thankful so much for Fran being with us here today. Thanks ever so much.
No, and thank you. Thank both of you guys for allowing me to even be in this area to share with the people here on Facebook and actually on podcast radio.
Yeah.
So I look forward to speaking with you guys, and hopefully, this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship.
There you go. And of course, HB Bell, we're grateful for his production behind the scenes. Thanks ever so much. We'll see you again next week.